right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the world's most exciting classroom. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. Wow, over the last 2 years, I have said that an awful lot. We've been hosting the world's most exciting classroom ever since the Oosterschelde left Plymouth in the UK way back in August 2023. Since then, we've been sailing around the world, stopping in amazing ports along Darwin's voyage of the Beagle. And now we are in our final stop. We are in the Azores, and within weeks, we will be back in Falmouth, and that will be the end of the Darwin200 expedition. So I want to share my screen here because I want to give you a feel for where we are in the world right now and a feel for where we've been. So if we pull out from this view, which you can find anytime at Darwin200.com, play with the map, click on the camera icon, and it'll bring up a whole bunch of pictures and video clips that we've uploaded as we've made our way around the world. Excuse me. We've also done a massive bird survey. So if you see that bird symbol in the corner, you can click on the bird symbol and see where we were seeing seabirds, land birds as we made our way around the world. But anyways, there we go. There's our route. And you can see how close we are to returning to Falmouth. We will be there probably sometime around the 17th, the 18th of July. It depends on how the wind's cooperating. But right now, the ship, the Oosterschelde and the Darwin200 team are in the Azores. We started off in Terceira. So you can see where we stayed in Terceira for a little bit. And now we are in Fayal. So that's our last stop in the Azores. And we have our final group of Darwin leaders on board right now. So as many of you know, we've been flying 18 to 25-year-olds to the different ports we've stopped in from around the world. They are students and youth who have really shown a passion for conservation. Maybe they've started a conservation organization. Maybe they organize big tree plantings every year in their communities. Maybe they've got a research project on the go. So we've been bringing them out into the field. They've been in the field with different researchers, different conservationists, making films and gaining new conservation skills. So we have hundreds and hundreds of films from our Darwin leaders that you can check out from all over the world on the Darwin200 YouTube channel. And our final group is there right now. I think there's a project for sperm whales. There might be another one for dolphins. So we have a few projects on the go before we set sail for Falmouth. So I'm going to come back from that screen share. And there's one more thing I want to talk to you about before we bring in our guest for today. And that is a last contest. So some of you might remember we had Jutwin on board with us. Jutwin explores caves and the biodiversity found within caves. And so he was with us from Rapa Nui to Pitcairn to Mangareva. And he was looking for invertebrates that maybe are new to science, to see what kind of life is on these islands. And he was also looking at a theory, the Polynesian canoe theory, that as Polynesians visited different islands and brought roots and plants with them, that some invertebrates would tag a ride and hop from island to island as they were exploring and visiting these different islands. So that was what he was up to. And several new species have been found, and we are ready to name one of them. So it's a marine cricket that was found on Rapa Nui. You might know it as Easter Island. We collected a whole bunch of names from students who live on Rapa Nui, and they had to tell us why they picked these names. And so we picked the top 5 names, and there's a voting contest open right now for classrooms to pick their favorite name. And then we're going to announce the winners when the ship is in London. And we're going to have a little scholarship, $1,000 scholarship for the student in Rapa Nui who had the winning name. So I'm going to share my screen one more time here, and I want to show you the voting form, and then I'll put it up as a link as well where you can vote. So let's see, where's that hiding? There it is. Here is the form. You can see a little sketch of the cricket done by someone who lives on the island. So he's a great artist, and he drew that for us. But then if you scroll down a little further, you can see one of the actual specimens here. And if you look at that measurement, 2 millimeters, it's not actually very big. It's a small little cricket, but it's very unique because it can survive kind of in almost that borderline of the marine ecosystem. So around tide pools and in little caves and things like that. So that's why it's called the marine cricket, which is kind of cool. And then if we look down here, you can see we have a few different names here to choose from. So like Ricky Ricky, for instance, which means really small, referring to the cricket. We have one that means Song of Hiva, which refers to the chirping. We've got one based on the red hind legs of the cricket. Another one based on Song of the Night. So there's lots of cool names here to choose from that the students came up with. So we hope to see a ton of votes coming in over the next couple of weeks. And July 27th will be when we announce the name of that cricket. So there's a picture of the Oosterschelde on moor here, anchored here off the coast of Rapa Nui. All right, well, let's get into some action. We'll stop that screen share. I'm back on camera. And we are going to take a little virtual trip to London. You know, I'm here from Canada. You know, we like to jump all over the world on these world's most exciting classrooms. And so we're going to head to London. We're going to spend a little time with Emma Milnes. She is the Deputy Librarian at the Prince Philip Library and Archives at the Zoological Society of London. And we're going to get to see some pretty cool things today. I'm not going to wreck the surprise. I'm going to bring Emma in right now from backstage. Here we go. Hey, Emma, how are you?
Hey, Joe, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for the introduction. I'm really impressed that you managed to get the full title of the ZSL Library and Archives in. I didn't think you'd managed to do it.
All right. Well, we try to accommodate when we can. And I want to make sure we give a shout out to Steph. I know you roped her in to hang out with the camera today. So grateful to have you joining us as well today.
So is it okay to get started?
Absolutely. Let's get into it.
So first of all, introductions, as Joe kindly said, my name is Emma and I'm one of the librarians here at the Zoological Society of London Library. Before I get going, there might be a couple of things that I need to clarify because I don't know if you would necessarily know. In the rest of the talk, I might say ZSL because that's here what we often abbreviate ourselves to. So ZSL stands for the Zoological Society of London. And I'm stood in the library, which is based at London Zoo. So that's another thing that could be a bit confusing. So when I'm talking about the zoo, I'm talking about London Zoo, and we are part of ZSL. ZSL is a much bigger organisation. They have both London Zoo and Whipsnade Zoo, which is out in Dunstable. But there's also a whole heap of conservation and science work that takes place, which again, you might not know about, but ZSL is actually involved in, I believe it's over 80 countries. Steph, is that right? Thumbs up? Yep. So we're involved in conservation, saving species in around about 80 countries. And so my job is just one tiny cog in the wheel of all the work that ZSL does. So we're here in the library. The library that we stand in was built in 1910, but our history goes way back earlier than that. We're nearly 200 years old. And as a result, we've got lots of material in the library and the archives, which is about as old as the society, some even older. We are mostly going to focus on Darwin, his involvement with ZSL, and show you a few really nice pieces in the collection. But if you'll indulge me to start off with, I thought I'd just show you a couple of other items just to show the kind of breadth of things that we have in the collection. So this very first book that we've got is actually one of our oldest books we have in the library. So for those of you who may have studied the Tudor period here in England, this book is about as old as Queen Elizabeth I. Well, not as old as Queen Elizabeth I, but it was created when she went on the throne. So this book dates back to 1560. This book was one of the first animal encyclopedias to be created. And so in this book, it's filled with amazing animals, some of which are a bit on the wonky side. On tours, we like to make people guess what this animal is. So I'll just let you have a moment before you guess, but it is a real animal. It's actually meant to be a giraffe. So if you're in Europe in the 1500s, you won't have seen a giraffe. So if you imagine someone might have said to you, I've seen an animal that looks a bit like a goat or a horse with long neck, some spots and some horns, maybe that's what you'll get. And then another really lovely item that we have in the collection, this one's a bit more recent, she says with air quotes. This one is from 1832. And for those of you who might know this poem, if I say the owl and the pussycat went to sea in a beautiful pea green boat, if you recognise that, it's by a man called Edward Lear. Now, Edward Lear was only 17 years old when he created this book, and the book was published in 1832. And it's the parrots that were actually living here at London Zoo in the 1830s. I'll just show one more, Steph, before we go on, if that's okay. That one. But this book's very special. There's only 175 copies of it in existence, so it's quite special for us to have. So without further ado, if we move on, we'll get going with Darwin. So again, I don't know if you know, but Darwin actually had a very close affiliation with ZSL, or at that time, I should just say London Zoo, because Whipsnade Zoo didn't exist for another 100 years or so. After Darwin comes back from his voyage of the Beagle in 1836, for about 5 years, he actually lived very close to London Zoo. He lives on a site which is now UCL, for those of you familiar with London. So he had a house nicknamed Macaw Cottage, I think, because it had really vibrant, colourful rooms. So whilst he was living in London, he lived so close by that he would just walk to the zoo to come and look at the animals, walk around and talk to some of the scientists who were here and really try to strengthen the ideas that he was formulating after his voyage. So the first thing I wanted to show you, this is Jenny, the orangutan, and the image is from something called the London Illustrated News. Now, the London Illustrated News was a very popular publication back in the early 1800s, right up until I think the early 1900s, because it was one of the first newspapers or publications that had really detailed illustrations in it. And they featured Jenny. Jenny was the first living orangutan to come to London Zoo. And when she was here, she lived in what is now, well, even at the time, was our giraffe house, still a giraffe house today, because it had heated rooms. So Jenny comes to London Zoo, she lives in the giraffe house, and this is how they dressed her at the time. I think maybe because she was so much like a child, they felt that it was more dignified to put clothes on her. But while she was here, we know that Darwin came to visit her at least 3 times. We don't know how many times Darwin came to the zoo exactly, but I'll come on to a few other anecdotes in a minute. But he came to visit Jenny 3 times. And when he came to see her, he was amazed at how much she seemed to understand. So one occasion, Darwin comes and Jenny is acting, he compares her to like a toddler of about 2 or 3 years old. She's crying, she's having a bit of a tantrum, and her keeper is holding an apple. And he says to Jenny, Jenny, if you behave, I will give you this apple. And immediately Jenny starts behaving, and Darwin starts to think perhaps she can understand human language, and there's a lot of familiarity in this face. It's not just an orangutan, maybe there's a bit more behind the eyes. And on another occasion, he comes to visit her, and he gives her a mirror. And in the mirror, it looks like she can understand that it's her reflection. So we think with these visits that Darwin makes to Jenny, that perhaps some ideas are starting to formulate that comes out later, that perhaps humans and apes are a bit more closer related than we think. So that is Jenny. Then, moving on. So the next 2 items I'm going to show you, these are from what is called, and it's a bit of a mouthful, I must admit I struggle with this, the Zoology of the Voyage of the Beagle. And when Darwin comes back from the Beagle and he's living in London, he's brought back so many specimens, which I'm sure you must have covered on some of these talks, but he has thousands of specimens with him that he cannot possibly go through by himself. So one of the things he does is he disperses his collection amongst the eminent scientists of the time and asks them to look through them and help him with his research. So not only are we fortunate enough to have the collection of books, there's 5 in total dedicated to birds, mammals, fossil mammals, fish and reptiles. But 2 of those volumes have particularly close relationships, again, to ZSL or London Zoo. So this first one I wanted to show you, the Zoology of the Voyage, and this one is part 3 and it's called Birds, and it's by this gentleman called John Gould. And fortunately, again in the London Illustrated News, I want to come over here, I'll show you this gentleman is John Gould. And John Gould was very famous at the time. He was famous as an ornithologist, but he was also famous as a taxidermist. So when Darwin comes back from the Beagle, he gives his bird collection to John Gould to look through. And in the beginning of this book, it's all text by John Gould. I'll just flick a few pages. So it's very, very detailed notes in here. But a bit further towards the back, we also have these really lovely illustrations. And just as a side note, these lovely illustrations are by John Gould's wife, Elizabeth. And it's a bit of a sore spot in history that John Gould never credits his wife, Elizabeth, for all these works. But in the introduction to this book, Darwin actually does give credit and says the wonderful work that Elizabeth Gould always gives to any of her artwork. So go on, Darwin. So if I flick a few more pages, I'm going to get to a particular set of birds that you might recognise. That's first page. And next one. And some of you may have already clocked what these birds are, but these are commonly known as Darwin's finches. Now, there are Darwin experts out there, so please forgive me if I do a terrible job of explaining what they are. But it's the idea that Darwin, when he's in the Galapagos, he collects these specimens of birds from each of the islands in the Galapagos. And then when he gets back, starts to notice that actually there are slight differences maybe with the beaks. And there's a famous picture, I think 4 of the Darwin finches, and when they're all lined up next to each other, you can see that some are a bit chunkier, some are slimmer. And again, it's this idea starting to form that perhaps it was one species to begin with, but on these different islands, perhaps these birds have evolved to suit the environment. So they came from one and then evolved into others. So the Darwin's finches are quite famous, and they were drawn by lovely Elizabeth Gould, so a name that you can remember. Shuffling up. And then another one of these volumes, which is quite special to us, is the Zoology of the Beagle, but this time fossil mammals. So these are mammals that are no longer with us. And this book was made by Richard Owen. And I have to show you his picture because we always joke that he looks like a supervillain. Every photo that's ever been taken of him, he looks very serious, staring straight down the camera. So this is Richard Owen. You might recognise the name because he's the man that coined the name dinosaurs. He's also, I loosely say there were other people, but he's one of the key founders of the Natural History Museum. So he was a very famous scientist at the time. And in this book, again, we've got some really amazing illustrations of fossils, or bones. These fold out. Now, interestingly, this book was made in 1840. However, if you know anything about Owen and Darwin, they had a huge falling out quite publicly after The Origin of Species comes out. So it's interesting to know that at the time, the two men were working very closely together and seemed quite friendly, because, oh boy, does that change later on. What's that? One more. All right. There we go. Just lots of bones. We're going to go round to the other side of the table, but maybe as we go, I don't know if you want to show this portrait of Darwin. So for any of you that have been in the UK, this photograph of Darwin is very familiar because it's on the £20 note. But if you notice, he's got a crumpled collar in this one. So it's like a not quite perfect version of the one that you might see on the £20 note in the UK. Now, this is the point that we get to that perhaps you're more excited about, and I can understand why. So here is the moment you've all been waiting for. We have a first edition Origin of Species in the collection. We're very lucky to have it. There were over 1,250 copies published, but I believe we only know where about half of them are. And in the time that I've worked here at ZSL, I know of at least 2 copies that have been discovered elsewhere. In fact, actually, one was a staff member. They discovered a copy on their shelves. So keep hunting. There are still volumes out there to be discovered. So now, I don't normally open the book. So we have to balance enjoying the book versus conservation. So if you want to come in, I'll show you the title page. Is that working? Is that okay? Yeah. So here's the title page, which we don't usually show to our visitors that come in because the pages are actually getting a little bit loose. So generally we just ask people if they want to see it to look at the spine of the book. But our copy's lovely. We got it actually later in 1899. The book came out in 1859. So 40 years after it was published, we got a copy. We're not quite sure why it took so long for us to get a copy. We have theories because Darwin worked so closely with people at ZSL. We suspect that he donated copies to individuals. And then maybe when those people left ZSL, or London Zoo, sorry, they might have taken their copies with them. So 40 years later, the library is like, oh dear, we don't actually have a copy in our own collection. So now, yeah, now we have it. So that's the book. I can always hold it again later if people want to have another look. But I should move on. We have a few other things that I can show you. We do also have some letters in the collection as well. So these letters are from Darwin to ZSL, and it's to our secretary, who is a man called Mr. Slater. And these letters were from 1870, and Darwin is essentially saying to Mr. Slater, can you check my spellings? There's a lovely line here that says, I have a most unfortunate weakness, though I strive against it, to copy proper names incorrectly. Can you check my spellings? And then over the page, sorry, Steph, making you move around a lot. And then we've got his famous signature there. There's a few other letters in here, which you might find interesting because they're not all in his handwriting. So I think he had, was it 9 or 10 children? So it might have been that one of them wrote the letter out whilst he dictated, but then you can see his signature again there. So it's like he's signed off and given permission. So I am conscious of time, so I will just show you a couple of other things, if that's all right. So The Origin of Species is perhaps Darwin's most famous work, but here in the library we do have a couple of other, not a couple, we have a lot of other things by Darwin, and that also includes other editions of The Origin of Species. So I don't know if you knew, but the 5th edition, Origin of Species, is special in its own right because this is where the phrase survival of the fittest comes in for the first time. It's not in all of the other editions. And then we also have the 6th edition, and if I turn this to the side, there were lots of publications of the 6th edition, and I think this was because the 6th edition is the popular edition, which is written for more of a general audience. And if I open this one, the title page, for those of you keen-eyed people who might have noticed a minute ago, there is actually a word missing on the title page. It's on. So editions 1 through to 5 are on the origin of species. But when you get to volume 6, that word on is dropped and it just becomes the origin of species. So I think, I'm not sure. Joe, if you're listening, am I allowed more time or do I stop?
I think we're seeing some pretty cool things. So if you want a little more time, I'm going to allow it.
Okay, I won't take much longer. I'll show you a couple more things. So, sticking with the book side of things, what I've got in front of me is what I've today decided to nickname the Holy Trinity of evolutionary books by Darwin. So, if you heard of The Origin of Species, there's a good chance you've also heard of The Descent of Man. So we have a first edition, well, there's 2 volumes actually. So we've got 2 volumes of The Descent of Man in the collection. And this is a volume that I must promise myself to read because there's lots of references in here to ZSL and him coming to the zoo and talking to people that worked here. And I've just got to read out one small line. So this is The Descent of Man, and in this, Darwin has come to the zoo and he's really interested in wild boar. So it says, a boar of this species in the zoological gardens recently broke into the cage of a warthog. They fought all night long and were found in the morning much exhausted, but not seriously wounded. So the books carry on like that. So that was a new discovery for us, how much London Zoo is referenced. And then also, the 3rd book, which is in the evolutionary theme, is The Expressions of Emotions of Humans and Animals. And this book is revolutionary in its own right because it actually has photographs in it. If you can get them. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think that some of the children in this book are actually his own children. And when you look through, I think we're in the section which is grief. And this page is joy. And then this page, which I absolutely love, the gentleman in the bottom left-hand corner, this is contempt. Now, the book was important in its own right. It was actually supposed to be part of The Descent of Man, but Darwin had too much to say, so he just published it separately. But it also has photographs in it, which the other volumes, they do not. And the publisher said to Darwin, we don't think you should do this because it could dent your profits photography was such a new thing to put into books at that time. And so the book was considered revolutionary just for its own sake, not just because it's by Darwin. Now, I do have lots of other things to show, so I probably should stop and just finalise by saying that if you're in the UK or visiting the UK, you are actually welcome to come and pay us a visit and look at these things yourself. Because things that I have skipped because I've talked too much, we've got some minutes which feature Darwin in them when he becomes a council member. We've got other books which are written by Darwin, including lots of plant books. You don't normally find plant books in a zoological library, but we've got plenty because they're by Darwin. And we want people to enjoy the collection. So if you ever find yourself in London, just look us up on Google, drop us an email, and you'll be welcome to come and pay us a visit. I think that's it.
All
Okay.
right. I just might have to take you up on that because it won't be too long until I'm in London. And that's really cool. And that photo there, is that a young Darwin photo there that you have?
Yes, it is. I think this portrait comes from something that we call the Ipswich portraits. So it came from a book that we have in the collection, and someone, I forget, I guess it was Miss Thomas Ipswich, I'm not sure. Anyway, there was lots of learned people who were featured in this book. So there's lots of scientists in the book, and Darwin is one of them. So yeah, he is. Yeah, that's him as a young man. You don't normally see him as a young man, do you?
No, I think that's an important thing to illustrate is he wasn't always the white-haired, big-bearded, learned gentleman. He did have youth. He was an adventure. I mean, he was going on adventures back in the day on the Beagle. He was riding horses. He was out on foot in the bush, collecting specimens. So yeah, there's a different side to him that we don't often hear about.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, those are just some amazing things. Obviously, the first edition book is pretty incredible, but those illustrations in some of those earlier books you showed us are just beautiful. The talent. I mean, the giraffe could have used a bit more work, but I imagine it was more of a description of what it looked like. But yeah, some of those parrot ones were just beautiful. Very, very cool. Okay, so I do have some questions coming in via the chat. The first one here is from Seven Oaks. And they would like to know, do you know offhand if Darwin had a favorite species? I know you talked about Jenny, but do you know, was there something else he visited the zoo a lot? Did he have a favorite?
I don't know about another favorite. The only other anecdote I've got, and I don't think it would be a favorite, but the only other exact example I got of Darwin coming is that he challenged himself. He had this idea that a fear of snakes was learnt rather than hereditary. So we've just found out from a researcher that apparently Darwin came to the zoo and put his face right up next to the glass that had a puff adder behind it. And he was challenging himself not to move when the snake struck at him. He moved. So I'm not quite sure what that meant for his theory. And I also don't think that would be a favourite, but I'm afraid off the top of my head, that's the only other animal I can think of that he interacted with at the zoo.
No, that's okay. That's a cool story. Stories like that we don't know about, that we don't hear about. I think students love hearing things like that. Another question here from the chat is, those books, do they have to be preserved in a certain way? How are you keeping them safe?
Oh, perfect question for a librarian. Thank you very much, whoever asked that. So the room that we're stood in is actually very hot and it's not perfect conditions. So these books do not live up here full time. We have a floor downstairs, which is called our strong room, and it's temperature controlled, humidity controlled. And I think everything on this table usually lives in there. So yeah, it's, these are not perfect conditions in this room, but we do have much better facilities downstairs.
Okay, so it's like a cooler room. Yeah, maybe not so much like,
I forget what temperature it has to be at, but there's a set temperature and there's also a set humidity. And then the fancy equipment that we've got in there will alter it automatically for us if things aren't quite right.
Okay, very, very cool. Another question here. Looking at Darwin's past, do you know of a moment, or did he ever talk about it in his letters or books, when he realized that the natural world was for him?
I think it happened. So I haven't read all of Darwin's letters because he's written thousands of them. But from the little that I know, I think from a very early age he was very interested. but I don't think he had the opportunity until much later. I think his parents wanted him to become a doctor, and he went to Edinburgh to study being a doctor, but it didn't suit him. He couldn't handle the blood and the gore. And then when he went to Cambridge, he started to really reignite that passion for natural history. So it was around about his time at Cambridge when he was talking to his tutors that it all got going. But I think it was much earlier, but it wasn't something that his parents wanted him to do. If my memory is correct, no Darwin
Nope.
expert, don't go and put this in any essays or anything.
No, you're nailing it. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think he always had that passion for the natural world, but there wasn't that support. And even the journey took convincing. His uncle had to convince his father to let him to go on the journey. So who knows what could have happened? There was the doctor. And then I think at one point they were studying to join the clergy. But thank goodness that he followed his passions and ended up on that voyage. Even that, if you read the stories, was kind of hit or miss whether he was going to get that spot. So it's just the way things work out. Okay. Do you have a favorite piece from the collection? Is it a Darwin piece? Is it something else? Maybe.
I do.
Yeah.
I do, and I'm really sorry to say that it's not a Darwin. It was the first book I showed you with the giraffe. I always try to shoehorn it into any library tour I do because I love it so much. And every time I show it, someone asks a new question, then I get the chance to go away and do a bit of research on it. So yeah, it's that first from the 1500s that's my favorite.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. It's it's from a time when we were figuring things out and finding new species and traveling to new places. And things like the duck-billed platypus, people thought was a hoax when they were first brought back, that someone just stapled a duckbill to a pelt. So it's a really interesting time. You look at the maps then, and the water will be full of pictures of sea monsters and creatures. And
Joe, just as an aside, you mentioned those maps with the sea monsters. They are a legitimate source for that book. So when you look in there are sea monsters in that book as well, and they came from maps just like you've described.
Yeah, so I imagine it's pretty cool to be able to go through those books and find those pictures and those stories. And we as humans, we like to explain things, and sometimes we come up with interesting ideas and thoughts. But it's probably cool to see how things change over time and as we understand the planet more. Yeah, very cool. Okay, what else do we have here? Okay, how many facilities does ZSL have?
Ooh, facilities. Well, I guess it depends on what you call facilities. We've got London Zoo and Whipsnade, which are the two big ones. But then within both of those, but I guess particularly at London, there's other facilities that are going on within them. So we've got the Institute of Zoology, where a lot of the science takes place. There's also like the education team, which Steph, who's very kindly holding the camera, which she works in. So like in terms of like different things that ZSL's got going on, there's a huge amount. And then when there's just Steph. So there's also the 80 countries that we work in, and within that 80 there are in-country offices, but there's also some offices that we work with rather than having offices with. I think that's correct, Steph. So yeah, it's quite a big number, and it does depend on what you mean by facility, how I answer that. But there's 2 zoos, if that helps.
Yeah, but there's a lot of good work going on, a lot of good conservation work. Not too long ago, I saw a story about the Darwin's frog, where you had someone in the field collecting Darwin's frogs in the field to bring back and to breed.
Yeah.
So that's incredible conservation work. So there's lots of stories. Yeah,
One of my favourite ones that I would encourage you to look up is the Partula snail. I love that. That's a really successful reintroduction story. And it's just like a tiny little snail. And I wish more people paid more attention to these tiny things rather than just the big ones. So Google Partula snails. It's a good story.
All right, very cool. I've got one more here coming into the chat. Do you know anything about if Darwin was ever seasick?
I think yes. I think I don't know enough about it, but I think he really struggled with seasickness when he was out on the voyage of the Beagle. But I can't remember where I've read that. But yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think he was quite unwell whilst he was out on water.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. He there were some times I think he would choose to go overland. Like he went across part of South America to meet the ship on the other side. So yeah, seasickness was definitely something that impacted him. And at one stage, we had a relative join us on the ship, a relative of the doctor who was on the ship. I hope I'm pronouncing the last name right. Boyne, I think. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the last name right because it's a while that we had him on, but he actually in Chile, Darwin got really, really sick, and he nursed him back to health. So who knows what could have happened if he hadn't been there to nurse him back to health. So we got to talk to one of his family members, one of his ancestors, who was very excited to share that story, which we were very happy to share, of course. Very cool. Well, Emma, I can't thank you enough for opening up the library to us today virtually, for bringing out so many cool pieces of Darwin's history and his stories. And a lot of students probably don't know he was a prolific writer, barnacles, carnivorous plants. I mean, there were so many things that he was interested in, and I bet you have copies of all of those.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I hope that while we're in London that we do our paths cross and we get a chance to either come your way or you come our way.
Yeah, if we can make it happen. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I want to thank Steph too, hanging out behind the camera. Steph, thank you so much for being with us today. We've got our group at Seven Oaks as well are saying thank you in the chat for answering some of their questions. They're pretty excited. Yeah, great history there. And thank you for sharing it with us and, having it available to anybody who's interested. I think that's pretty cool too.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. Thanks so much, Emma. Thanks so much, Steph.
Bye.
See ya. Thank you. Okay, very cool. I thought that would be something really special to do today because, as you know, we're having trouble with our Starlink units on the ship. So it is hard to connect with them right now, but any chance we get to bring a little bit of that Darwin history. So you might remember way, way back when we hit Cape Verde, which was one of our first stops on this journey. It's where Darwin collected an octopus, and he watched that octopus, he studied it, and then he preserved it as a specimen. And we were able to visit the Natural History Museum in London and see that specimen. So John, who's their mollusk curator, was able to show us that, which was really cool. We've had stories. We've had different ancestors of Darwin join us. Like one of our ambassadors is Sarah Darwin, so his great-great-granddaughter. So it is great to mix in the history. And I am really glad we had a chance to visit the library and archives at the Zoological Society of London and see those priceless books, really. So that was really neat. So a few things we're going to do before we wrap up today. We have a final experiment to look at. We're not going to have a new one because this is probably going to be one of our final World's Most Exciting Classroom events. We've got last week's curiosity to look at as well. And then we probably, when I'm in the UK, maybe in Falmouth, and then maybe again in London, we'll go live for two small little events to do a catch up, talk to some of the crew, share some stories from the voyage. So that should be fun. But officially, World's Most Exciting Classrooms, this will be probably our final kind of structured one with a timing and such. Okay, so let's take a look at our experiment. So 2 weeks ago, we looked at an experiment called crystallized bugs. So we were looking at, could we crystallize different things? We challenged students to try and crystallize some bugs for us. And actually, I'm just getting a message here. We might have something that we're going to do before the experiment. So give me a second here. I just got a message from Josh, our camera operator in the Azores. He's in the field right now with one of our Darwin leaders, but he says he might be able to pop in for a minute just to say hi and catch up. So I'm going to share him the link really quickly in WhatsApp. And then probably in the next few seconds, we'll have Josh come in with us and we'll have one more catch up, which is great. We'll be using not Wi-Fi, we'll be using cell connectivity in the Azores because, like I said, our Starlink units just did not survive the 2 years that we put them through. So let's give it a second and see if Josh comes in here and joins us. And then we'll get to that experiment and we will get to the final curiosity of the week. And then we'll have some connections in Falmouth and London which I'll try to put out in a newsletter when we know exactly when those are going to happen. But I will share the recordings of those as well, because they might be a little more spontaneous depending on our timing. And there we go. There's Josh. Hey, Josh, how are you?
I'm good, Joe. How are you?
Yeah, good. Good. Josh, what's behind you? Is that volcanic rock or plant?
It is volcanic rock. Yeah, we're actually out and about. We're doing some filming today, but there's a little bit of wind, and I'm only on my iPhone microphone, so I thought I'd come and sit somewhere just a little bit out of the wind. But we're actually at a beach here in Horta.
Beautiful. Well, we won't keep you too long. What project are you on? What are you doing with your leader?
So I'm on a project on deep sea corals and the restoration of deep sea corals. So we're working with the Azores Deep Sea Lab. So that's my project. And then the other project is on deep sea mapping. So 2 deep sea projects this time, which is really interesting. It's not something we've ever done before. And then there's 2 more Darwin leaders next week, which I won't be involved in because I'll be on the ship. And they're doing sperm whales and local fisheries.
Okay. All right. Well, great to hear. We're getting a few more leaders in and through with us. Where's your leader from this time?
My one, she's a mix. She's from Australia, but has lived in the UK, but also lived in France and lived in Ireland. She's got 3 passports, so she's from everywhere. And then the other Darwin leader is from New York, or from California, lives in New York.
Very cool. So I talked to Mariana via WhatsApp the other day, and she was very excited. Sounds like she was able to get her samples.
Yes, yeah, we did one final round of samples as we were approaching Graciosa, another one of the islands that we just anchored up outside for the night. So she came out with 100 kits to get her samples done, and she's used 97 of them. So she's done a pretty good job.
Yeah, she has. That's amazing. That's going to be a great legacy for the journey, because no one's ever really done that before. That kind of eDNA collection.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. So she's gonna be a bit busy when she's back in the States processing it all. But hopefully in a year or so we should be able to see the results of it all.
Yeah. If you see her, is she still with you guys at the ship?
Yeah, she's still on the ship. Yeah, she's gone off hiking today. But yeah, we'll be back with her this evening.
Perfect. If you see her, and grab a picture with her in the Explorers Club flag.
Yes.
You can.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, she did mention that.
Yeah, very cool. And then so, Josh, I think just we're talking a little bit about how this is kind of like the last structured World's Most Exciting Classroom. We've done like 100 between the live ones for North America and UK, and then the ones for Australia and New Zealand, and then all the stuff from the field. We've done like 130, 140 live connections over this journey. And you've been with us for a ton of them. So I'm curious, you've been traveling around the world, you've been filming, seeing crazy things, meeting incredible people, the Darwin leaders, the scientists, the researchers. How are you feeling? Is it sinking in that like in a few weeks you'll be back in Falmouth?
Yeah, it's a very bittersweet feeling, because obviously it's been one of the most amazing experiences of my life the last 2 years. And it's going to be strange going back to a normal life, but I have also spent a lot of time away from home, and it's quite a chaotic lifestyle. Part of me is looking forward to just having a bit of a rest for a few weeks. Yeah. But I think the more I think about it, the more I'm sort of dreading the end of it, because I've made so many great friends along the way as well. That especially the crew of the ship that I live with and I spend every single day with. It's going to be strange going from that to not seeing them anywhere near as regularly, and just being in one place for a long time is going to be a strange feeling after the last 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a question just came in from Seven Oaks, and they're wondering what it's like in the Azores. Is it really hot?
No, surprisingly not. I was expecting it to be absolutely boiling. There have been some warmer days, but on the whole, it's like a British summer. So it's sort of 20-ish degrees with a bit of breeze, and there's usually a bit of cloud around. But from what I hear from the locals, they have really wacky weather here. It's sort of a 4 seasons in a day kind of place.
Sure.
So yeah, not at all what I was expecting from the Azores.
Yeah. So I have to ask, how was the diving? Did you get out last weekend?
Yes, we did get out, and we dived with Nuno.
Perfect.
And he was great. Yeah, he was awesome. It was much colder than all of the diving that we've done so far on the voyage. So that was a bit of a surprise. But it was really nice. We saw lots of eels around and conger eels and big lobsters. No octopus, unfortunately, but we went to the wrong dive site for that.
Okay.
But yeah, it was nice to get in the water. And then a few of the crew and the guests went diving again yesterday in Horta and saw some eagle rays, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, awesome. Good stuff. Okay, one more question here from the chat, Josh. What kind of wildlife have you been seeing? Is there much wildlife in the area?
In the Azores, there's a lot of when we're out and about. Every night you hear the Corey shearwaters every night, and there's lots of terns and other seabirds flying around. From the shore, we haven't seen a great deal, but there's a lot of whales kicking around. So there's whale watching tours going out all the time. I think we're trying to organise a whale watching tour over the next couple of days. So that'll definitely be a highlight if we can get on a boat to go and see some whales. That'll be really, really nice.
Yeah. All right, Josh, one more question for you as you look back at 2 years of sailing around the world. Is there a wildlife encounter, if you had to just off the top of your head, that's kind of the highlight for you? Holy smokes, I can't believe I saw that.
Yeah, I always think I get this question quite a lot, obviously, and I always think my time back to the Falklands, and being in amongst all what is very raw wildlife there, sitting in the albatross colonies and sitting with the penguins and watching the elephant seals go about their day. So just not necessarily one encounter, but just the month that I was lucky enough to spend in the Falklands is something that my mind always goes back to when people talk about my best experience.
Yeah, amazing. Well, Josh, thank you so much. I know this is kind of last minute. It was great to have one more connection this
I'm glad
week.
we could work it out.
Yeah, and next time around, it'll be something from the ship in Falmouth. So that'll be great. And actually, our group in Sevenoaks is saying just a shout out to your videography. They've loved everything that you shared.
So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's been
awesome.
It's been a real pleasure. Best job in the world.
Yeah, pretty good. Say hi to Mariana and enjoy your last little bit in the Azores.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, Joe. Bye, everyone.
Okay. Thanks, Josh. See ya.
Bye.
Perfect. I'm glad that worked out. So that's nice to get that one last connection from the field. And then, the next time we'll be doing something will be from the ship, and it will be in Falmouth. That's where Darwin finished his voyage after 5 years. So ours a little bit shorter, but technology changes. Obviously, we can move when there's no wind, and we didn't spend as much time in places as Darwin did as he made his way around the world. So ours was a 2-year journey, whereas his was a 5-year journey, but we're left from the same spot, and we are returning to Falmouth, where he returned as well. Okay, so I was talking about crystallized bugs, and we have to take a look at the results from the crystallized bug experiment, our final experiment of the DARWIN200. So just bear with me while I dig around and I find the results for our crystallized bug. Here, oh, nope, I almost played the ones from our other event. Here we go. Here's the bugs.
Welcome back, everyone. How did you get on growing your very own crystal creatures? Well, I have to say I learned quite a bit when I ran this experiment. I found that the type of alum is very important to the success of this experiment. I tried lots of different types of alum. Some worked and some didn't. The best one that I found that worked was potassium alum stones. So like this, if you can find packets of alum online that come as these stones, then I boiled them down to make that super saturated solution. I did try several types of powdered alum, such as alum sulfate and also potassium alum powder, but they didn't seem to work so well. So if you tried this experiment and it didn't succeed, try and get potassium alum stones just like this and run the experiment again, and you should get some very interesting crystal growths. Well, as maybe you can see here, my creatures have become covered in crystals. Look at the little ladybird. That one's got lots of big crystals. Did you notice where the crystals mostly form? I watched the crystals develop on my creatures and spotted that they really occur in areas where there are rough textures. Maybe that's because that's where the crystals can form and take hold early and then grow from there. Looking at my ladybird, the crystals have mostly formed on the ends of the legs and the top of the ladybird's body. Do you think all the crystals have the same shape and structure? Look really carefully at your crystals. I think my ladybird here shows very clearly that all the crystals are slightly different and have a slightly different shape, but the structure is essentially the same. They all have these flat, sparkly surfaces, just like diamonds. Well, I left this ladybird in the supersaturated concentration for about a day and a half, but for the other creatures, I tried different amounts of time. This beetle was in the solution for about 3 days. And look at all the crystals that have formed on this. And the crystals tend to be much bigger as well. This beetle is almost completely covered. I love that sparkly effect, almost like diamonds. I left my third creature in for a whole week. Look how many crystals developed on it. It's completely covered in these beautiful white, sparkly crystals. Isn't that pretty? It's just like a cluster of diamonds. For fun, I tried a few other objects as well. Knowing that the crystals developed on rough surfaces, I put in this stem from some grapes. And look at all the crystals that have grown along it. The ends of the grape stem are completely covered in these beautiful angular crystals. This stem was in a solution for about 5 days, and these crystals seem to have grown much faster than those on my creatures. Perhaps that was because the solution was more concentrated. Lastly, I put in the stem from some tomatoes into the solution as well. And look at the massive angular crystals that developed on this. I really hope you enjoyed growing your very own crystal creatures.
Okay, so there we go. That was pretty cool the way those turned out. We actually ended up with 2 kind of crystal experiments to wrap up. We had make your own geodes a couple weeks ago, and those turned out really well. The purple geodes that Stu made on eggshells, and then the crystallized insects turned out really well. We didn't get a lot of submissions in for that one, but I'm not surprised because it is the end of the school year. Most classrooms in Canada, the US, I think some in the UK as well, if not most of them, are all on summer vacation. So a shout out to those who were able to join us today. But I'm glad we got to see the results from Stu's crystallized bug experiment. Before I do the curiosity, I want to remind those tuning in that we have one last really cool contest going on, and that is to name one of the new species that we found on Rapa Nui in Easter Island. So Jut Wynn, our resident biologist exploring the caves, he's been to Rapa Nui on numerous occasions. He's collected many specimens from the island, and we are going to have a shot at naming this new species of marine cricket, which I think is really, really cool. So if you are a student and you want to put in your vote, it's not the coolest link. It's kind of a long one, but I'm going to leave it up here for a minute so you can take a screenshot. You can always come back and look at this video. And then in our newsletter, we had a link in there as well. And then there'll be another newsletter probably coming out next week. And we'll have the link in there as well. So you have all the way until July 27th to put in your vote for the name that you want to use. I will share my screen one more time just to show you what the vote form looks like. Let's see, here it is. So we've got a nice picture here of our insect. This was drawn by a local artist on Rapa Nui. He did an incredible job drawing this cricket. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, you can see an actual specimen that was collected, and you can see just how small they are. This is 2 millimeters. This isn't very big. So this is not a very big cricket species, but it's unique. And as far as we can tell, it's endemic, which means it's only found on Rapa Nui, which some of you may know as Easter Island. So we had students on the island come up with names. So we have the scientific name here. And then this is the end part that the students were coming up with. And we picked 5 of them with why the student chose those names. And it ranges from really small to the song of that cricket species, to the red hind legs, to the song of the night, to just naming it after the place, Rapa Nui. You know, this is the only place in the world you can find this cricket. So that's why that student thought it should be called. It's the last piece of that scientific name should be Rapa Nui. So there you go. Those are the 5 that you can choose from. So please do take some time whether you're a student at home, whether you're still in the classroom, and make your vote for the name of this new marine cricket species. Okay, last thing we have to do is the answer to our final curiosity of the week. I've got it queued up here and ready to go. Last 2 weeks have been tricky. Last week's was tricky, and this week was another tricky one. Stu didn't give you a lot of clues, but let's take a look at the answer to that curiosity. Here it is. Here we go.
Back, everyone. For last week's curiosity, I asked you to try and identify what this almost perfect sphere is. If you remember, it's not from an animal or a plant. It's made out of stone, but it grows over time. Could you work out what this little object is? Well, believe it or not, it's a speleothem. That means a formation like a stalagmite or a stalactite. It's known as a cave pearl, but it's formed through a slightly different process. Cave pearls form when water in a cave is moving a little bit too much to form stalagmites. Calcite concentrates and forms and builds up around a nucleus, such as a grain of sand, and slowly grows as concentric layers, forming an almost perfect sphere. Over time, the cave pearl might roll around and the surface may be polished and become really smooth and pretty, just like a regular pearl. These beautiful little cave pearls have even been used in jewellery across the ages. Well, did you correctly identify this as a cave pearl? Let's now find out who won this week's prize. Thank you for watching and see you next time.
All right, there we go. That was our curiosity of the week. We had lots of answers come in. And this week, I think I'm going to pick 2 classrooms because it's our last one. And these classrooms are on opposite sides of the Atlantic. We've got one classroom in Nova Scotia, Miss Lightbourne's crew, and we've got another group in the UK at Seven Oaks. I believe they're hanging out with us today as well, which is pretty cool. And so while neither got the cave pearl name, both had a really good explanation for what they thought it was: sediment and clay building up. So I think that's good enough for our final curiosity. It shows you were thinking, and I'm gonna get Sophie to send out some $50 Amazon gift cards, and those will be the final ones, I guess, we're giving away during the Darwin 200. So I am going to come back here for one last time and really a shout out to the classrooms. It's been so great to have classrooms joining us from all over the world. Rough guess is we've had something like 300,000 plus students hanging out with us over this period of time, which is really, really great. It's been fun to do the curiosities. It's been fun to do the experiments, to be out in the field and broadcast live into classrooms. We've had so many amazing experts from all over the world join us. We've had our Darwin leaders, our camera operators on the ship. Just a couple weeks ago, Jane Goodall joined us, one of our ambassadors. So it was really great to kind of bookend the journey with Jane, hanging out with us for a bit. But we will try to do some live connections from Falmouth and then maybe a live stream from London as well. So keep an eye out for newsletters, and maybe Sophie will share them on social media as well. For now, though, we have to sign off the way we always do with a shout out to our sponsors, supporters, and partners, without whom we wouldn't be sailing around the world. We wouldn't have our young Darwin leaders joining us and gaining new conservation skills. We wouldn't be doing the world's most exciting classroom. And we wouldn't have our Explorers Club researchers like Mariana on board. So a lot of science, a lot of live classroom events, a lot of young Darwin leaders on board. We've been pretty darn lucky. So we do have to shout out to those sponsors, to those supporters. And again, thanks to those who tuned in. Thanks to those who will check out the recording over the next week or so. And I will see you next from Falmouth, and then maybe a quick connection in London. So have a great rest of the week. And thanks for being with us today. Thanks, everyone.